Hello, everyone, and welcome to the chat. I hope I'm going to be coherent. It's early enough in the day, I probably will have a good shot at it. And I'll start by reading a question from Tricia, who says, Please, Dean, can you let us know how the third part of Chris Snow, Ride the Storm, is coming along? I am a diehard Dean Koontz fan, but I'm getting older. I must know what happens. Tricia, I love you since you love my work, but don't pull that I'm getting older pity trick on me. It won't get the book written any sooner. Uh, I'm working on it. I do hope to have it within the next year or two. I had a little disagreement with the publisher, my publisher at that time, who wasn't real happy with the second volume, and I thought this was only our second book together. I better take a little break and do something else and go back to the third because I didn't want to have a bad relationship right off from the start. And then I just sort of wandered off into 25 other books, but I will get back to it. Brendan asked, Dean, if you could pick 5 of your books that would comprise the collection of Dean Koontz's greatest hits, which 5 would you choose? I can't choose 5. I think I could choose 7. Watchers, From the Corner of His Eye, I had to write them down. Life Expectancy, Odd Thomas, Ashley Bell, and I don't say that just because it's the new book. I just love this book. I love that character. Intensity and Innocence. But, you put your heart into all of them. So they're sort of like children. And I know that's a cliche, but it is. Except you don't have to send them to college and have their meals on time. Jamie asks, what got you into writing? Did you have to take classes before you made it a career, or did you just wing it? I myself would like to make writing a career out of love, passion, and art. But my main problem is, do I have to go to college just to make this happen? Any suggestions? I don't think you have to go to college to make it happen. In fact, there's a little moment in Ashley Bell where Ashley worries that so many people now become writers because they took writing in college. My favorite writers, from Dickens to John D. MacDonald, were not people who went to college to become writers. John D. MacDonald had a degree in business, but he loved to read and he loved books, and I think that's the primary thing. In my early days, I read 200 books a year, mostly always novels. And if you're going to read a lot of novels, that's an education in itself. You don't have to study them exactly, but the more you read, the more they burrow into your mind and the more you start noticing technique that different writers have. Then Rebecca asks, Ashley Bell, yes, I read it already, addresses so beautifully the power and responsibility of the writer to her or his readers and self. Have you ever wondered or worried whether, now I have to change this a little bit because there's almost a spoiler in it. Have you ever wondered or worried whether your talent might get you into trouble the way that Beebe's did? Yeah, I say in this book, I think one of the chapters toward the end of the book is titled The Dangerous Art. And writing, I think, can be a dangerous art because you're putting yourself out there. You're putting your views and opinions and things out there, and sometimes people write you and are very upset with you. Now, the views and opinions aren't necessarily every character. That's another issue to make. People write me and say, I can't believe you believe this or that, and I think it should be pretty obvious that I don't believe everything that every character in a book believes, because if I did, I would have the same love of killing that a serial killer has, and I don't. It's okay for the weekend kind of thing, but I just don't love it. Yeah, Beebe has great talent in this book, and what I will say I share with Beebe is there has never been a book I've written in which a character says about writing so many things that are what I believe about writing. So when Beebe has a thought about the process or about the importance of it, it's really me in touch with my female side saying what I really think. Eric asks, whoops. Eric asks, only once before have you titled a novel after a person? I mean, of course, Odd Thomas. However, he was the main character in the novel. How come you decided to name this novel after a character that is not the main character? I'm trying to think how that happened. I think it was basically, I knew the novel was going to be about another character. I don't think in the beginning I had the name Phoebe Blair yet, who is the lead character of this book. But I knew she was going to be on an epic search for somebody. And I wanted the name to be one that resonated, that had some real character to it and was kind of easy to remember. Thank God I didn't name her Ashley Madison. That would have been had connotations none of us want. But Ashley Bell kind of resonated, and that's not meant to be a pun, but I just realized it was because of the bell. And I've always liked books that have character titles in them, like Oliver Twist. You know that if somebody else writes a novel, they're plagiarizing your title if they actually use the title Ashley Bell. So I think I went through 20 or 30 names before we all agreed that that one really had some feeling to it, and that became the book. So I wanted it to be more about the mystery of who that title character is, not necessarily that she was like Odd Thomas, the lead. Lori asks, if in a fire with family and furry friends were safe, what book would you save from the library you're standing behind and why? She means the library in the photograph on the back of Ashley Bell. That's actually not my library. That's a hallway that has one copy each of all the books in various languages that I have written. And there's about 7,000 different copies in that hallway. So when things aren't going well with the new book, I go out to that hallway and stand there and look at it and say, okay, you idiot, you've done this before. You can go back into the room and do it again. But what book would I save if family and furry friends were safe? You know, since it's my books in that hallway, I'd just probably throw myself into the hallway and burn alive with them. I'd feel that way about the library too, with all the books I've spent my life collecting. If I were trying to save one, it very well might be A Tale of Two Cities, because that book has some special meaning to me. I've talked about this before. When I was in college and high school, I was kind of a slacker student. If the subject didn't interest me, I didn't work at it. If I was asked to read something, I would get the hairs up in the back of my neck and just decide, I'm not going to read what I'm assigned to write. I'm going to go away and read a Heinlein novel or something by Ray Bradbury. And then I would fake having read the book. I would write my paper based basically on the ad copy on the book. And I never got caught in high school or college. I was a con man. And so when I was about 30, I read Dickens for the first time. And the first book I read was A Tale of Two Cities. And I was so profoundly moved by the book, I ended up reading all of Dickens one right after the other. So I would want to save that book because it turned my head around and told me being a slacker isn't the best way to get through college. And I would want to save, I have a very special edition of The Wind in the Willows, which is the book I remember most from childhood. And Mr. Toad and the Badger and all those characters were really important to me as a little kid. And I've found that you can read The Wind in the Willows at any age. You can read it now, and what it has to say about life is just as strong as it ever was. So I'd save those two, and then I'd probably split. Now I'm going, all my writer friends will give me their books. Why the hell didn't you save one of mine? But they'll just have to live with it. Linda asked, just finished Ashley Bell, so enjoyed it. When are you putting out another one? Would love to get a copy of Shattered, the only one I can't remember. I love your books. They take me to places that I can't wait to go. Don't rush out and hurry on Shattered. That's an early one, and I'm actually going to revise it. So you want to read the thing after it's revised. But Linda's like an editor or publisher. You just finish a book and pick it out and say, when you're getting the next one in. Don't put the pressure on me, Linda. I'm doing the best I can. But I'm working on a book called Joanna Moon. Yes, another one titled after a character. And it's a completely different story than Ashley Bell, but it just so happened I got in the mood to write, if I stay in the mood, 3 books where the female character is very strong. And in the second book, she is the lead of the book. So that book is called Giant Moon. Sydney asks, what inspired you to begin writing such phenomenal books that keep everyone on the edge of their seats while reading? Now, see, it becomes obvious to me a lot of these questions are being written by my wife under other names because of all this praise. But so, Gerda, don't go at it so strongly. It's a giveaway. The inspiration for books are, you never know where they're going to come from. Odd Thomas just came into my head. The whole first chapter, and I've told this before, I was in the middle of another book. I heard the line, "My name is Odd Thomas, I lead an unusual life," in my head. I do not take medication for schizophrenia, so I knew it was something else. And I wrote that line down so I wouldn't forget it. And the next thing I knew, I was writing by hand, the only time I've ever written by hand, the whole first chapter of the book. And it ended up being the first chapter of the book. I had to make very few changes in it. But other times, the inspiration, I remember From the Corner of His Eye. I read a lot of science, and I was reading a book about quantum mechanics, and it was fascinating me that everything in the universe is so intricately interconnected to things that particles on opposite ends of the universe are aware of each other. The sense of non-locality in quantum mechanics, that from our perception, locality, place, is very important. We all live in a place, we work in a place, and distance is very important. But what we know now about the foundations of the universe is there is no such thing as place or distance, that everything is essentially in the same place. What this means is very difficult. Nobody knows. Richard Feynman, the physicist, said nobody understands quantum mechanics. And yet everybody knows it's the truth of the universe. And I was thinking about this, and I thought, it just suddenly hit me that human relationships were exactly like particles in the universe, that everything each of us does affects people we will never meet or know. Because everything we do bounces. We do a good thing for somebody, they may do a good thing for somebody else. That's a very simplistic way of looking at it. Or do a very bad thing to somebody, they may put them in a mood and they do something bad to somebody else. And all this ricochets, just like it does on the quantum level. And that's where the idea From the Corner of His Eye came from. And I thought, how am I ever going to write a novel that shows this? Well, it became, if you've read it, you know, a very huge novel, but I really think it's one of my best. And it was, at the same time, I lost 20 pounds writing the book, and I wasn't 20 pounds overweight. That's how difficult it was. But it was also one of the great pleasures of my writing career. So the ideas come from all kinds of places. And I think somebody might ask about Ashley Bell ahead, but so I'll wait on that. And if somebody doesn't, then I'll tell you where Ashley Bell came from. David asked, did you have any other titles considered for Ashley Bell while you were writing it? Only other names. As I said, went through probably 30 names trying to find one that would work and that would feel like it would be very memorable and would also feel like it might be a real person. You'd be surprised when you're coming up with character names how often they don't sound like anybody real would have that name. And yet you want it to be something that's a little different. You don't want everybody named John Smith. And that's right, Anna. Anna just went, which meant she agreed literarily with my comment. Anna is here, by the way, our dog, and maybe later she'll get up and say hello. Gray asks, I adore the creativity, character, and strength of your female protagonist. Is any one real-life person in your life a model? I've said before, I've put women in lead characters in suspense novels almost from the beginning. When they were never in novels, suspense novels anyway, written by men. You had to go to Helen McGinnis or other writers like that, wonderful writers in the field, and their characters were women leads. But I think I did that originally and have done it all along because my mother had a very hard life. We were very poor, and my father was a violent alcoholic. I've talked about that. And my mother had a very strong will and a very strong ability to survive almost anything. And so my mother is in some characters. My wife is very much the same way. She's very tough cookie, as I would put it. And if there's anybody that Bibi resembles more than anyone else, it's probably my wife and the way she would handle things. So I've known some other very strong women, and I'm always fascinated with them because I don't think, even sometimes when women write women characters, I don't think they write them as strong as I would. I'm not saying I'm better than a woman writing a woman character. That'll get me in a lot of trouble. Uh, I'm going cross-gender, but it's sometimes I think people write, men and women write women characters and give them a number of weaknesses just to show they're rounded that I've sometimes not found in many women in my life. So that's about as much as that. Amber asked, or first says, hi, Mr. Koontz. Hi, Amber. I'm a longtime reader of your books. Do you have a book that you've written that holds a special place more than others you've written? Well, I listed those 7 that are very important to me. Every book has a special feeling for you because of things going on in your life when you wrote it. And just, you remember that period of your life. In fact, the way I remember key things in my life is what book was I writing then. Of course, a book that's very close to me is a memoir I wrote called A Big Little Life, which was about Trixie, our first golden retriever. And that probably will always be in, I didn't list it in 7 because it isn't a novel, but it'll certainly be in my top 3 of books that are close to my heart. The next question is from Ashley Bell. And we have heard from several Ashley Bells around the country, including a young actress. So this Ashley Bell says, wow, my favorite author wrote a book about me. I'm so touched. Seriously, though, how did you come up with my name, Ashley Bell? I'll definitely try to be here for the chat, Ashley. Well, I've gotten there already. Out of 30 names that I was trying to get, and we were looking for beautiful names that you thought, isn't that a lovely name? And also, doesn't it make you wonder about the person? That was the one that I could come up with. And I had 30 that I thought fit, but that was the only one that we all agreed, editor, publisher, wife, dog, that was the one that people would get most intrigued by. So you have a very intriguing name, Ashley Bell. And now you have a book named after you. In fact, if you send me, excuse me a minute. I'm fighting a little bit of throat problem, but in fact, Ashley, if you write me in the back, at the address in the back of the book, I will send you an inscribed copy of Ashley Bell so you have one to yourself. Ingrid asks, do you have gifts for Anna to open on Christmas? People don't buy us gifts because we don't really need gifts, but everybody buys Anna gifts, and we buy Anna gifts. And we open gifts on Christmas Eve, and it's quite a spectacle. The sofa is completely covered with gifts for Anna. There's a big pile on the floor as well. They've come in from all over the country, and many of them, when you open them, it's a gift bag with tissue paper in it, and there's a toy or a couple of toys buried in the tissue paper. And the very sound of tissue paper makes Anna begin to go crazy. And you can't get the toy out of it. She sticks her head into the bag trying to get to the toy. It becomes quite a spectacle to watch. And it takes a couple of hours, but there's a lot of laughter and a lot of fun with it. And of course she has to get Christmas presents. I mean, she's, there's some people that bristle at this, but a dog is a member of the family, and she's like our daughter. So we would no more have a daughter we didn't buy a gift for than we'd have a dog we don't. Kimberly asks, what was your main goal when you started writing? Gee, you know, I wrote my first short stories when I was 8 years old, and I can't remember having a goal. Although I did peddle them to relatives for a nickel, so maybe I was trying to make a little more money than I got as an allowance, which was probably at that age about a quarter. That might have been part of it, but it was also, I can remember the first story I ever wrote was called The Magical Puppy. And that is very strange when you think where my life and writing life and life with dogs went after that, but because I never had a dog as a child. Um, I think it was just probably a look at me kind of thing. And it wasn't until I was in college that that I actually realized you could make a life out of writing. And that was my senior year in college. I'm a little slow on the uptake sometimes. Um, so then when Gerda and I sat down, uh, everybody almost knows that Gerda made me an offer. I was teaching school, and she said, by that point, I'd sold a couple of paperbacks, not for very much money, um, a number of short stories. And Gerda said, I'll support you for 5 years. And if you can't make it in 5 years, you'll never make it. And I often say I tried to negotiate her up to 7, but she's Sicilian, so she always wins negotiations. And I don't want a horse's head in my bed. So I settled for the 5. I thought it was the most generous thing I'd ever heard, and quit teaching. And but before I did that, I said, well, what do we have to earn for this to work for a life's work? And both of us came up with the same number. Now this was many years ago, but we agreed that if I could just earn 20 or 25,000 a year, that would be enough to make this worth being a life's work. And we never imagined that we'd end up being on the bestseller list or anything, but that's what happened. So the goals for writing, sometimes you just have to do it. I think writers are born with the urge to do it. Talent is an unearned grace. You didn't have anything to do with it. The craftsmanship is different. But the urge comes along with the talent, I think, and there's just no way not to do it. Lisa says, this book was amazing. Thank you again, Gerda. This book was amazing and truly speaks to today's issues in so many ways. Did you plan that, or was it just fate stepping in and whispering to you? I don't plan very much in a book. I start out with the premise, the idea, and I know certain themes that are liable to be arising in it. I generally know the central theme of it. And in this book, the central theme is the contest between two philosophies of life. One that your life is decided by fate, and what is going to happen to you is going to happen to you. The other is that you have free will, and you can take on anything and try to triumph, and often can. Bibi has that attitude. She's a hard charger. She leans into the sharp edges of life. She doesn't even weep about misfortune. She tries to take misfortune and turn it into something better. But her mom and dad are believers in fate. What will be, will be. And they love each other. And I love both people, and I love all of them. I love that family in this novel. They're a surfing family, for those of you who haven't read it yet. And if you haven't, why the hell haven't you? But anyway, I love this family, and of course they live here where I live in Newport Beach, so it was fun inventing a surf shop called Pet the Cat, and you'll be told why it's called Pet the Cat when you read the book, but because it's a surfing term. And I just love the family very much, and I wanted to see the dynamic of, which of these is going to come out in the end to be the one that seems to be more correct, fate or free will. And so that's sort of what I started with, and then all kind of other things arose in the course of the story as the story evolved. And I was only in chapter 5 or 6, and this is a book with short chapters because it's the way the story told itself. That wasn't planned either. It's also a book in which every chapter has a title, and I haven't done that since probably Phantoms. So that was something new for me. And then other things start to fall together. And I think I was on chapter 4 or 5 when the big twist hit me, and I was like a 4-year-old child just bouncing up and down in the chair, literally. And then I realized that was going to be a very hard twist to sell, but it ended up, everybody so far who's read it tells me they should have seen it coming, and they didn't. They love the twist when it hits. So it evolves as it goes. I knew that twist was in there and was going to hit about 2/3 of the way through the book, or a little further. And that was it. Is it fate whispering to me? No, I just think the more you do this, for all of you who want to be writers, I've known people who write one book, and when it doesn't sell, they stop. I wrote 4 that didn't sell and a number of short stories that didn't sell. And the more you write, the better you get at it, the more you start to understand how to do it. And that never stops, I think. Uh, I think I'm learning things to do that I never thought of doing a year ago. Um, so it's just the doing. It isn't fate. It's just learning the craft, I think. Heather asks, what are 2 of the strangest things that have ended up inspiring you to write? And which books came as a result? I've told this story before, but it comes to mind again. Let me see. Look over at these. Well, it's probably a little strange. Watchers is probably a little strange. I had never had a dog. And one day we were visiting some friends who had a dog and they had a child as well. And the child was talking to the dog, which, as I've learned now that I have had dogs, I talk to the dog all the time. And sometimes, in its way, the dog is answering. And I thought, that dream of childhood, I guess, is a very strong dream if you have a dog as a child, that your dog could talk to you. And the moment that thought entered my head, then came Watchers. And I couldn't wait to sit down with that book. Now, the dog doesn't directly talk, but it's about, for those of you who hadn't read it, it's about a dog that was bred and raised to like 2 years of age in an experiment in enhanced intelligence. And there are 2 creatures in the lab. One has been raised as a crossbred mutant sort of creature that might one day be a good battlefield weapon. And the other one is this dog that's been raised with enhanced intelligence. And they both escape. And the hideous thing hates the dog because everybody loves the dog and everybody's afraid of it. And the dog finds ways to communicate with humans in the book. So I got to do a book about a dog who can't talk but can interact with human beings on their intellectual level. When I had a British agent publisher at the time. It was very strange. He was my agent and my publisher. And when I delivered the book, the manuscript was received very well here, but he said, I cannot possibly publish this, and I can't even submit it to anybody else. They'll laugh me out of the business. And I realized suddenly that he did not have a very good imagination. And I said, I'm going to sell this book, and if you won't publish it and or sell it to someone else, I'll have to get a different agent and publisher, which I did. And that turned out to be a blessing. So Judy asks I go back and tell one more little story. I've told this one before. I was in a meeting at a film studio, and I got out of it in a homicidal mood, which is how you always get out of meetings with studio executives. And I was driving Gerda's Ford Explorer, and she had a bunch of Paul Simon and Simon and Garfunkel albums on it. And I turned it on, and that music can kind of take you away. And there was a song on it called Patterns. And it had a line in it, my life is made of patterns that can scarcely be controlled. And for some reason, that gave me the idea of a novel about somebody who knows, because of something that happened on the night of their birth, knows that certain major terrible things are going to happen in their life. They just don't know exactly when. They're given dates. That's how it evolved. They're given a date. And I won't go into how this happens, but it's totally believable. And you start the novel on the night this character's born, and then you jump forward to he's 20 years of age when the first of these things is about to happen. And he doesn't know exactly what, he just knows one of these terrible things is going to happen on this date. And that was life expectancy, which is one of my favorite of my own books. And that book almost wrote itself and has various times come very close to being adapted as a TV series, but it always blows up as these things do. So those are a little fragment of a song from Paul Simon and just something a child said to a dog, and you've got a novel idea. Judy asks, do you wake up at night thinking of ideas for a book, and do you have ideas for one book at a time or more? You are a terrific author. There's Jared again adding that little thing. And I don't wake up with ideas in the middle of the night. I think I did once. I'm trying to remember which book it was. It's not going to come to me now. But generally speaking, though, I have very strange dreams. I tend not to have scary dreams. I tend to have funny dreams. And so my dreams are not very much help. More than one book at a time. Sometimes as I'm writing as Odd Thomas, I get an idea for another book, but I can't possibly write two novels at one time. So I write the idea down, or as with Odd Thomas, the whole chapter, and then move on to the book, back to the book that I'm writing at that time. I'm very narrow focused, besides which, when you are deeply into a book, it's like a real world. It's not like a story I'm telling, it's like a world that exists to me. And that's why I like working 10-hour stretches, because that furthers that feeling. Eva asks, out of every character you've ever created, which one have you put the most of yourself into? You put little bits of yourself into a lot of them. As I mentioned ahead, Bibi, in fact, the kind of writer she is and how she works, and certain things she has, the way her imagination works, and one of the big themes of this book is imagination, is very much me, and there's a lot about Bibi that's me. There's little bits and pieces of Odd Thomas that are me. There's the character of Life Expectancy is me. Pieces of his whole family are me, because the way I deal with everything bad that happens in life is humor. I can find humor in a funeral, which is why I have to keep my mouth shut at most funerals. If you can't laugh at yourself and just about everything in life, it's going to be pretty grim. So Jimmy Talk in Life Expectancy is in that way, he and his entire family are me. And it was like when they had conversations, it was various aspects of me talking to other aspects of me. Let's see, here's one. Oh, okay. Sarah asks, Bibi Blair is a voracious reader, and books she reads as a child have a profound effect on her. What books did you read as a child? It bumped up on the screen. What books did you read as a child that stayed with you? How did they shape your life? I mentioned before The Wind in the Willows, which was a real profound effect on me as a young kid at 8 and 9, 10 when I read it, and I reread it a whole bunch of times. And then I read mostly fantasy and science fiction until I was in college at some point. And so Robert Heinlein had a powerful effect on me. Ray Bradbury, Theodore Sturgeon, how I tended to like from the beginning people like Bradbury, who had a lot of fun with the language when they wrote. And I think that drove me to want to do that. That was a profound effect on me. Let's see, Jordan asked, you've told us where you get some of your ideas when you're writing a book. Do you have a research team, or do you do it all yourself, such as the war zone sequences in Ashley Bell? Ashley, for those of you who haven't read the book, is engaged to a Navy SEAL who's overseas on a Black Ops situation. I do all of it myself because I need to look at a number of different sources. I may have an assistant, I'll give them, say, go online and get me this, and get me everything you can on this subject. I tend to do most of the research still out of books rather than online, because I'm a little leery of some online sources. And I want to know who's composing what I'm looking at. Those war sequences in Ashley Bell, they aren't much. They're just a few things, but there's so much detail in them that has to be correct, because I have readers in the military, and it's like any reader in any area that they know something and you get it wrong, you're going to get a bunch of letters. And I just don't want to be called a jerk more than once or twice a day. I'm used to that. So I found that the research is one of the great pleasures of it anymore. You're learning about something you knew nothing about. And you really, now I knew something about Navy SEALs and how they work. I've got a lot of background material on that. I also have a Rolodex. Fortunately, when you've been successful at writing, a lot of people with specialties will write to you and say, this is what I've been doing all my life. If you ever need something that you can't research feel free to get in touch with me. And so I have little cards in a drawer with those people, and once in a while I'll call one of them and um, get something from them that I can't find in a book. But mostly you can find everything. It's just cross-researching to make sure you're getting things right. Clarissa asks, hi, I've read every book you've published. I love people like Clarissa. Clarissa, a woman of taste and substance. Obviously, I love your books. How do you keep your writing fresh and new ideas flowing? I think it goes back to writing, writing, writing. The more you write, the more ideas come to you, and the more you keep yourself open to things. Like, I've known some writers who say, I don't want to read when I'm writing because I'm afraid it'll interfere with my style. And I think, well, if you sat down and read, while you're writing a book, 20 novels by the same writer, there might be a danger of that. But if you're reading different things all the time, nobody's going to affect you that much, except that you might read something that gives you a great idea for the book you're working on. It's also why I say don't read just the genre you're interested in writing. Read widely, and I read in any genre. I don't care what the genre is. And literary fiction is basically just another genre, and I read that. Now, literary writers will become very incensed by that, but it's absolutely true. It has its traditions, it has its approaches, it's exactly what it is. And I value the mystery as much as I value the literary novel, if they're well written. And there's bad novels in both, but that's where you get ideas from. At least it's where I do. Just keep feeding the brain, and it's amazing what the brain will do for you while you're not even looking. All the ideas tend to be manufactured in the subconscious and suddenly just bloom one day. And I don't know, this might be the place to say how Ashley Bell came to me. I have a friend who is dying of the very cancer, gliomatosis cerebri, that Ashley Bell is, or that B.B. Blair is diagnosed with in the beginning of the book. And one day I was just writing a letter to him after reading one from him, and I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if you could do a story in which somebody had this very thing and nobody survives it. There's 100-a-year cases in the US, and nobody has yet survived it, and most people don't make a year. And suddenly I thought, well, how would you explain that? How would the first person to go into remission from it go into remission? And that got my admittedly strange head thinking about it. And I didn't have an answer, but I got so intrigued with the idea that somebody would come into the hospital room with a therapy dog at a strange hour. And after that, she would find herself in remission. And she would wonder, did that have something to do with it? And I won't say whether it did or not. It might be a very big red herring. But she, I thought, well, just write it. When you get to the point, you're going to have to do a lot of medical research, and you're going to have to explain that. I did have to do a great deal of medical research, but at one point, I realized what was going to happen. And I mentioned it earlier. It was early in the book, and it got me so excited, I was just bouncing up and down in my chair. And so I think I've answered that. Ideas just keep flowing if you keep feeding your brain. I think that's my point. Regina asked, what books have you reread multiple times and never get tired of? I've reread Dickens a lot. I have reread John D. MacDonald, the suspense writer. Not so much the Travis McGee novels in that series, which I liked, but some of the standalones, which I have always been amazed at his ability to write character so interestingly that he'll stop the plot for 2 or 3 pages and tell you the background of a character, which I've never really dared to do that. And I remember when I first started reading him, I would think, no, keep the story going. I want to know what happens next. And then I'd get about a page into this character background, and it would be so fascinating that I'd be upset when he went back to the story after 3 pages. So I reread him just to remind myself what you can do with character to make it such that it's as much fun to read as the plot. So I reread him. I reread Flannery O'Connor, especially the stories I like the most, like A Good Man is Hard to Find. which I continue to believe is the most frightening story ever written because of the ending. The ending captures a certain kind of psychopath that nobody's ever captured as well. Or Everything That Rises Must Converge is really a terrible story in a way, but it's about an everyday event, but it's about somebody realizing the loss of something that they didn't think they were ever going to miss, and it's a powerful piece. So anybody who moves me, and there are a bunch of writers, I'm leaving them out, but those are some of the basis of this story, as it is about a writer, have any basis at all in your life? Do you? No, I can't read that. It might give something away. What Ben is asking, I think, is, let me put it this way. One of the things that's important is this novel, and you know it from almost from the beginning, is there's some things that have happened to Bibi as a child that she is incompletely remembered. And there's a reason she's incompletely remembered it, and a very good one. And that's going to have a lot to do with where she goes in this story. And that and the books she read as a child. I think probably what Glenn would, unless he's trying to do a spoiler here, bad Glenn, it would be, I think what he's trying to ask is, do you mind your mine, M-I-N-E, your memory, or is that something that helps in the writing process? And I would say yes, we all misremember things. In Bibi's case, there's something else going on that's almost a repression of memory, but we all misremember things and half remember things. And when you get to a scene that you're writing that in a way plays off something that happened in your own life, you do have to stop and do your best to remember what actually happened. And I'm going to stop there because I'll start giving something away in this book. Stacy asks, hello to my favorite author. Who gets to read your novels first when you're finished writing? Almost simultaneously go to my wife, Gerda, and to my editor. And this is, my editor's name is Tracy, and she might be listening. And Tracy, this is no reflection on you. You're the best editor I ever had. But the most important reaction is my wife's. And because otherwise, I've got to move out and all that kind of thing gets ugly. But Gerda has the best take. It's just wonderful. And she'll say things to me when I was much younger and more stupid, and my manly pride was what it was. She would say something about it, this scene doesn't really work the way it could, and here's why, or like that. And I would go, well, you're wrong about that, and this is why you're wrong about it. And then I'd go into my office and rewrite the scene, which she wouldn't know I'd done until she read the finished book, which is our second reading. And it was just like I couldn't acknowledge for a while. And then I got over that manly stupidity, because that's what it is, and realized good things are good things. Go in there and say it. It doesn't, like when Tracy, my editor, gives me a good idea, it doesn't say on the cover of the book, Ashley Bell by Dean Koontz with great ideas by Gerda Koontz and Tracy Devine, his editor. So I get the benefit of taking their ideas and making the book richer for that. So I'm always going to do it. Let's see, Debbie asks, I'm looking for a new TV show to binge watch. You recommended Friday Night Lights and I loved it. Yeah, that's great. And I'll say again, not the movie Friday Night Lights. They're two completely different animals. But so if anyone else hasn't seen the TV show Friday Night Lights, it's really worth binge watching. Any new recommendations? I have been so busy the past year that I have watched almost no TV. So I don't have anything for you, Debbie. But I'm gonna just for you, I'm gonna start watching some things, and I'll let you know. Okay, Thomas, and I think I'm being told this is the last. Okay, Thomas asks, hi, Dean. I love all of your books, and I'm enjoying Ashley Bell right now. What was the best book you read this year? Oh, I read a book, a nonfiction book that is spooky. It's a book by Erik Larson called In the Garden of the Beast, which is set in Nazi Germany just at the time that Hitler and Nazism was really taking over power. And it's about it's more than that. It's not a typical history book. It's about a society slowly going mad, an entire society. And reading it, I kept looking at things that are happening in our own world today that were happening then that nobody thought. It just seemed everything got a little creepy. I'm seeing little creepinesses like that entering our own world. And it was a very disturbing read and very profound read. So if none of you, it was a bestseller and should be easy to find in paperback. So if you haven't read it, I would say go ahead and read it. You'll enjoy it. I'm supposed to conclude now? Yes. Did I get that right? I often make mistakes. So I have my keeper here who is making sure I don't. Well, I've enjoyed these questions. I hope you've enjoyed my answers such as they've been, and maybe we can do this again. And I know we're going to have this available on the website and things that people can find it pretty easily within a day or so. So if you weren't here for the whole thing and you want to see more of it, you can do that.